Call to order the Strategic Planning Committee meeting. We've got 4 topics on our list today. Whether we'll get into all 4 of these in various amounts of depth remains to be seen. But we have operational forecast, financial forecasts. That may be a short topic, but we still want to talk about it a little bit. Community reinvestment, income tax incentives, and development agreements were all topics that were brought to us by the mayor to bring to this group and start to get some ideas and processes around this as we move forward. So, with that, does anybody else on the committee have anything before we start? Russell? Very good. And I'll turn it over to the mayor.
All right, I confirmed that our live stream is up, and then Mr. Brosser texted and said he is joining momentarily. So I'll go slow through my first couple of slides for him to be able to join. Well, thank you first and foremost for joining us. Sorry it is on a Friday afternoon. You are not a very easy group to get together these days, so I appreciate your willingness to come in. So today, really just wanted to go through a couple of items. Since this is the Strategic Planning Committee, I just want to kind of reiterate the pillars of the strategic plan that were identified. A safe community, a well-run city government, caring government, thriving business environment, an attractive place, and an active community and a connected city. So I'll try to highlight in each of the items as we go through them, kind of how they tie back to those pillars. As Chairman Wobser mentioned, today we're going to talk through a couple of items: operational forecast methodology, development agreements, community reinvestment area, and the income tax incentive program. On the first 2, it'll be primarily discussion and just kind of FYIs as we will be working through these. And then on community reinvestment area and income tax incentive, I need a little bit of feedback and direction on those. All right, so starting with the operational forecast, again, falls under goal 2, a well-run city government that's transparent, easy to engage with, and prioritizes its employees and citizens. Our team has been working diligently, working with our departments to continue to develop better systems for tracking and reporting out really to you all. Moving forward, one of the things that when we develop our budget currently, we have a really thorough process. Our departments do a great job, but one of the things that drives Rob Merton and myself crazy is that it's the annual budget and we don't really have a monthly breakdown. And so obviously we know that some expenses are paid twice a year in certain months, sometimes they're one-time expense, etc. So we're going to be working this more just things that we're doing. Our departments will be having a monthly budget that we'll use internally just to track against. As we look at the operational forecast, there's kind of 3 main points that I want to call out under objective. So a 2.4, ensure the city of Findlay is an employer of choice. You saw us take steps towards updating our payment structures and our employee wages and making sure that we are in line. And we've developed kind of an internal process for regularly checking and making sure that we have competitive wages. The other 2 items that we're going to be focusing on today are objective 2.5, which is continue to ensure the city's long-term financial strength and stability while protecting our 1% income tax, and maintain, plan, and invest in capital assets to ensure they are safe, affordable, and high quality. Andrew, it looks like you joined. Can you confirm that we can hear you in case you want to interject?
Good afternoon. How's everybody doing? Thank you.
Turn you up a little. Can you speak again, please?
Good afternoon.
Perfect, thank you. I might have to adjust that later. But at least we know we can hear you. So feel free to interject as we go along.
Will do.
And then 2.7, maintain, plan, and invest in capital assets to ensure they're safe, affordable, and high quality. So for a couple of things. So as you know, I've been putting together an updated financial projection. One of the things that the auditor had identified in years past is that we didn't have kind of a publicly available operational forecast. We used one internally as Rob and I were putting it together, and each year at your budget meetings, we would show kind of operational performance. But we wanted to put something together that is more formal. So we've been working on putting that together. I've talked it through a couple of times with Mr. Brosser, and have provided a draft of that back in March to the auditor. He provided some initial feedback, but hadn't had an opportunity to this point to put together those revenue projections. So we now have a shared document and he is working through that. And once that is updated, we'll bring that back to this group before it goes to all of council. But just a couple of notes as we're working through that I wanted to highlight. You'll see kind of 3 proposals that I'm going to be making to all of you. In a shift a little bit with how we have been doing our distribution between capital and operations. And you guys know that I want to continue to invest in capital and I would love to continue to increase that amount. But as I was looking at our budget right now, there's been a couple of shifts that have been putting additional strain on the operating budget that really had previously been items that we were paying out of capital. Most notably is that R&M, streets, sidewalks, and curbs were previously paid out of our capital budget. And that's about $500,000 of expenses that we have been allocating each year. In 2024, the state auditor's office that was shifted to the operating budget out of the SCM and R fund. And so we've been taking that hit the last couple of years out of operations. But as we move forward, I want to kind of shift this proportions of capital to general fund allocation as a percentage of the income tax collection to help offset that because we really are covering that out of operations. And that's a pretty hefty hit. Additionally, as I was looking at it, interest earnings and the hotel motel tax are both kind of variable expenses. Interest earnings obviously is the most variable. And so it really shouldn't be something that we account for and rely on in operations. And so what I would like to do is allocate the capital earnings again directly, or sorry, the interest earnings directly to capital. So that way, as it's coming in, we can adjust, but it's not kind of part of our operating budget. With the hotel motel tax, similar principle, it's a little more reliable because it's generated based off of users. But one of the things that I've been thinking about for a while is that the motel tax is primarily driven from people visiting and using our recreational. And so from my perspective, it makes more sense to allocate that to improvements of our and maintenance of our recreational amenities. And so what I will be looking to propose and we'll have discussion on as we sift through the numbers and obviously the auditor's feedback on the structure is looking at decreasing the income tax distribution from that 80-20 split down to a 90-10 split, but then allocating the hotel motel tax and the interest earnings directly to capital. One of the other things that I think that allows us to do is right now throughout the year, that 80-20 split as income tax collections occur, then the auditor's office goes through and processes and moves those funds throughout the year over to capital. What we could instead do is look at doing a look back and that the capital allocation for the next year would be off of the prior year's collections. And so that way, then we also have a little bit of buffer period because as we've seen over the last couple of years with getting rid of that estimated tax payments is that we do the distribution based off of actual collections, but then we may have refunds that come in future years, such as the $2.885 million that we had occur this year, which wouldn't have if we had been doing the estimated tax structure. So just wanted to give you a heads up on those couple of items.
Mayor, and not on those, that's a pretty significant change in the way that we've done things in the past. At the very beginning of that, you talked about, what was it, streets and that we got put into capital, pulled out?
So R&M, so repairs and maintenance of streets, sidewalks and curbs.
Okay.
It's about $400,000 a year. And up until 2024, we were paying for that out. In 2024, that started being paid out of the operating budget of SCM&R, which now has then increased the subsidy that we're making out of the general fund to the SCM&R fund.
What happened, Jeff, was it was actually done the way we're doing it now in the past. Somewhere along the lines, there was enough of a shift by the administration to capital. And it's not capital, it's maintenance. So it really is an operational cost. So with us subsidizing streets with the general fund anyways, right, it's a wash. The other thing we're doing is chargebacks. And chargebacks, if they're done correctly, should be a wash. So it's zero impact on the department at all. But essentially, general fund money was being used to subsidize streets, who was repairing, maintaining curbs and patching for years and years and years. As those requests got bigger, some of them got shifted to capital. and weren't recognized as maintenance, even though they were maintenance. So that's been corrected, shifting. But it's 6 one half dozen the other. Ultimately, the question is that we put the right amount in the streets and that it's funded, and it's a subsidized fund anyways.
Right. So, okay, Mayor, thank you for that. Thank you, Jim. So what we're doing, we're taking the variability issues, which so your hotel motel tax and interest income. Obviously, a fair amount of variability in those. And we're gonna introduce that into the capital fund.
Mhm.
However, with your 1 year look back idea, that does cut down on variability slightly.
So the look back would be on the income tax collection portion.
On the income tax,
So you would pretty much start off by saying you're putting a 90-10 split of the income tax collections that are coming in,
right?
as well as then the interest earnings,
Okay,
as well as the hotel motel tax. So you have those 3 line items that are consistent. And then you would have the flexibility to say, hey, going into next year, our performance was really strong. We have additional revenue. Rather, would we like to add additional funds to next year's capital budget based off of last year's?
okay.
So again, not
There's-
using this
yeah,
decision
right,
today,
no
I'm just
decisions,
giving you a
but
heads up.
I just want to make sure everybody understanding what we're talking about here, so they kind of think through it the right way.
Yeah,
My biggest concern with just the overall conversation is that we don't end up, even though you're right, Jim, we subsidize capital anyway. We end up putting more money into it generally every year to do more than what is the 20% portion.
Your biggest risk here in the proposal, from my perspective, is you can create the impression by changing that allocation that you have more operational funds than you actually have. Because of the way you do the subsidies and the needed monies that will have to be shifted to capital to continue to improve where we're position wise, like the state continues to say that we're underfunding capital. And as we do these studies, we'll know more and more. But the item is you don't want to inflate your operational revenues by not doing a proper allocation. In other words, it may be more
I see
prudent
what
to do
you're
it at the
saying.
beginning, because if the unions look at it, or the
Right.
public looks at it, it can
Okay.
easily get the impression we have much more cash than
So
we
the
have.
additional 10%
It's a big number.
is a big number.
That's a big
That
number.
would show up in general fund.
but you're also backing out, the last couple of years, we've had about $700,000 in hotel motel tax collections each year. And we've had, over the last 5 years, between $500,000 and $2.5 million in interest earnings each year. So those would be separate up. So again, just bringing it up
No.
as we go through the projections and I see more insight into the auditors, projected revenues to determine what we're coming back with those. I just wanted to kind of give you a heads up. Those are some of the things that I think.
And with Andrew over there, make sure he's included in the conversation. Andrew, did you have any thoughts along those lines?
Yeah, I mean, specific to the income tax, I'm sorry, the interest earnings allocation, back in 2009 and 10, when rates dropped and went to zero, I mean, we saw a lot of communities really relying heavily on that within just general operations. And so as we came out of that, we thought, well, there's a better way to manage this going forward in the future so that you don't run into that problem again. Now, it's not a guarantee you're going to get that revenue stream every year, right? And so I think you're using it in another way that gives you flexibility to cut back on an expense instead of employees is a much smarter use of that or allocation of that revenue stream.
Andrew, how are those communities protecting against the slippery slope of underfunding capital, which is easy to do and a best practice no when it comes to long-term budgeting?
Yeah, I mean, some do a really good job of it, some of them don't. So it really sort of depends where you're at and what sort of revenue streams that they have available to them. I mean, some folks don't have the flexibility like you have had to do a good job of allocating revenue streams within the budget to your capital needs. I think that some of these communities, lay out a pretty aggressive capital plan and try to go after it pretty heavily during when times are good, so that they are able to, make sure that they get in front of those issues, Jim, and attack them And maybe you have to back off when times are bad, right? I mean, but the one thing that they didn't want to get caught in again was, oh shoot, now we're missing $3 million out of our budget from interest earnings. How are we going to deal with that?
And I think one of the things too to emphasize here is that the capital improvement plan that we're talking about, again, very critical. It's not the water and sewer infrastructure aspect of things. It is typically more heavy on the parks and recreation, some of the road projects, and then equipment. So those are the things that we have a little more flexibility to say, okay, we can go a year without that, or we can adjust here, or we can shrink and prioritize, okay, those interest earnings and the hotel motel tax are going towards kind of these things, and that helps us be able to manage it. So I think we'll be able to lay out and kind of work through, and then my goal is once we have a little more insight, then we can also show how it would impact the capital plan as we kind of have laid out for the next couple of years.
Very good.
All right, so the next item kind of in that vein is I also just wanted to point out, because there's been remarks that, you know, we're really drawing down the general fund balance over the last couple of years. So I looked back at and this will be also broken out in the operational forecast. Right now I have it structured where it shows the revenues, then it has the departmental operations, as well as then these unbudgeted transfers, which are kind of discretionary, right? We come to you guys and we have a determination on if we want to follow through with it or not. Here's some examples. So we've paid that 2.885 tax refund. We paid the $2 million towards the severance fund, 4.7 million towards flood mitigation, 171,000 towards the self-insurance fund. So I just wanted to call those out, that the majority of the kind of unbudgeted general fund expenses over the last 5 years were not kind of flippant items. They were strategic items to support our reserves, to support our rainy day over the years, to support flood mitigation. And most of these were not items that unexpected. We just kind of moved them into those other funds. So just wanted to share that.
Excuse me, this would be a good point for me to interject. I made a recommendation to the mayor the other day along this lines that the expense side of the forecast should show personal, other, and capital. In other words, the way you guys allocate, when you allocate budgets, you control down personnel and others. So if you give a name for personnel, it's all personnel. The biggest expense of your budget is personnel. So if you break down personnel, other, which is everything else, and then unique capital, and if it's presented in a forecast that way, you guys have a clear understanding when you're looking at, there's only two places you're really going to cut in a really bad stretch, and that's going to be capital and personnel. You're going to be forced to look at those two areas, because your fixed costs, you still need to buy a road salt. You still need to, you know, buy copy paper and all those other things. So by breaking it down that way, you guys.
Yeah, and I agree. I'm comfortable with that, and I already have it structured where it has the capital and the pass-throughs split out.
Okay.
All right, so I'm not giving a projection since I haven't received the revenue, but I did want to show actual performance for the past couple of years. And then we will update this with the projections. Again, the orange is the expense budget, with the red being the expense actual performance. The green is the revenue actual versus the blue, which was the revenue budget. And then you have the trend lines. The orange dotted one is your expense trend line. The green dotted line is the revenue trend line. However, because we did have two kind of anomaly years, I also provided the dotted blue trend line, which shows your revenue, or the revenue trend line excluding those anomaly years. So just wanted to share that we, again, have been doing a good job of managing budget and managing our expenses throughout the year to make sure that we are within the revenues. All right, questions or comments on the operational financial projection?
Move forward.
Very good. I know. I don't want to keep everybody too late, or I'll owe y'all something. All right, so moving into development agreements. So development agreements support goal 5, which is, and specifically objective 5.6, support safe and diverse housing options for all in this instance. So as you guys recall, when we set up the TIP at the end of last year at the southwest corner of 9 and 75, one of the items that I presented to you guys as kind of on the horizon was the Casto development as well as the hotel development that are looking to go into this area. And an opportunity because this area has multiple property owners that are all kind of waiting for somebody to put in the infrastructure. It's kind of delayed some of the investment in this area and is an opportunity for the city to help spur development, control a master plan in this area. And also be able to, through a development agreement, help offset the costs of doing so. And so I'm been working with the developers. Actually, I'm gonna skip forward here a little bit to show. So this is the initial roadway that was shown in the TIF documents, if you recall, that has been put together. That's an estimated cost of $1.4 million for the infrastructure to connect those properties. This lot right here, I got too many computers. This lot right here is where the hotel is looking to go. And then this area down here where this roadway would come down and connect, so it would be this road into this road was what I just showed. Is looking to go down here. So that I've been talking to both of those because the problem with putting that road infrastructure in is that both of those properties, the roadway actually isn't on either of the properties they own. It's on a neighboring property. But the neighboring property is not ready to develop, so they don't want to put in a road. But those other developers are like, wait, it's gonna benefit not just me, why should I carry the entire cost for it? So it's just like this whole, which comes first, chicken or the egg situation. So this provides us an opportunity to step in, be able to push it forward. And then a development agreement is a structure in which we can say, okay, we're willing to do X, Y, and Z. And you're able to provide a development, a contract that states we will provide you X dollars for a period of time to help offset that cost. So in this instance, Casto had kind of been the first one reaching out, trying to push this, and they said, hey, if you're willing to put in infrastructure, we will pay over a 10-year period for that investment. So $140,000 for 10 years. So that would cover the entire cost. Then when we were talking to the Casto development, I said, well, it's going to benefit them as well. They should be at the table, or the Sunrise Hospitality group. I said they should be at the table because it's going to benefit them as well. And so we've been talking to them about giving an additional $80,000 ADR for 10 years. So they both have initial draft development agreements in hand. One of the things though that is added to this is, as you know, over the years, we have talked about trying to put in a pedestrian bridge across I-75 that would connect the Cube Recreation Complex to the west side of I-75, which would support additional development here, connectivity for these neighborhoods, and be able to be a good connection with future development, especially if folks come in for tournaments and then are staying in hotels or shopping, whatever it may be. Yeah.
I'm really not good with directions.
Yes,
I can see I-75 on there.
yes.
Where is this like directional?
This is, so like the hospital property.
And I don't really know what side.
So this is literally the southwest corner of 99 and 75.
So west side.
Southwest,
99 is.
that side,
Yeah, so, yeah,
not towards Toledo. Okay, I'm sorry, really.
you're good.
But it'll help me figure out,
Hillcrest Golf.
Yeah,
Right
this
down
is
there.
Hillcrest Golf Course right here.
Bottom.
but see, to me, I turn around, but anyways, it's
Yeah,
fine.
no, you're good.
75 looks like it's on the wrong side. It will show to me that way, but it might just be.
Yeah, you're good.
Thank you.
Yeah, so really what I just wanted to give you a heads up in that I am in discussions with them. One of the more unique aspects about this one though is that the developer is interested in selling us this property that we would need for the bridge as well as additional connectivity down into the Hillcrest property if they were to do any future developments with this cost. So they have proposed an initial number. We're still working through the details. I sat down with the auditor and Pfizer earlier this week. And we're working through the contracts and a couple of other items, but I just wanted to put that on your radar since we had talked about it at the end of last year, that's something that I'll be bringing back to this group. And one of the aspects that I think is really important, and as we talked about with the tips, is that I want development to fund development as much as possible. So this wouldn't necessarily be, using capital dollars. It wouldn't necessarily be using general fund dollars, though those are certainly options. My desire would be that we utilize bonding if appropriate and support from the development agreements to help offset any costs that the city would take on up front. And then long-term, this also does not, it layers in with the TIF. So this does not, by doing a development, negate any of the benefit that we would also get from the TIF revenues down the road. Questions or comments on that? And then here is just examples, because I know you guys haven't seen this one, but this is you can kind of just see here. This is where the hotel is looking to go, is at the southern part of that parcel. And that's one of the reasons that they're like, hey, we need the roadway. The Capstan needs the roadway. Who's gonna build it?
I can add to this. Whether there's debt or not, Andrew, feel free to chime in if you like. Can you, hopefully you can hear me okay.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Absolutely 100%. Council, who would work with Rob should be Bricker on this, and Bricker should take the lead on reviewing the agreement and any affiliated documents. For two reasons. One, these developers, particularly a developer like Casco, is a big dump. And there are a lot of ways a municipality can get hurt. And I've used the 236 example in the past of how promises made were not promises kept, and we're 2 million in the hole on 236. We don't want that to ever happen on something like this. We always want to be whole. So one of the things that I recommended, and I think Andrew even commented on in an email, was that there needs to be enough hooks here so there's liability, so the city is always whole financially on something like this. And provided the numbers work, and that's yet to be shown, but we'll take a look at it. Second thing is, Bricker needs to be involved, because if we are ever considering a debt issuance, that's a lengthy process. And all the debt issuance legislation starts earlier than you think, because some of the pieces have to have particular wording in, much like we did I think a year and a half ago or so with a piece of legislation on the bridge or north of the river, just to make sure we were in position we could issue debt should we have chosen to do so. So those are the two reasons I need to make sure, and I've reached out to Bryce Finley, who is our contact at Bricker, in conjunction with Rob, and we're hoping to get an initial process meeting together as to how the process would work, what the goal would be, and what they would have to do.
The 1.4, what was the recapture on the TIF? Of what I remember you gave us numbers.
Well, so I don't recall specifically. I can go back and look at the TIF document, but Andrew's team was also going to run updated figures with new valuations and different things like that.
So that number would stay the same, and then we would recapture 140,000 a year for 10 years and approximately 80,000 a year for 10 years on those two additional guarantees.
Over and above the TIF revenues, correct?
For 20 years.
Yes.
And Andrew, is this a kind of a common tool for municipalities to attract investment such as this or such as this?
Utilizing TIF districts?
Yes, well, these development, not TIF districts, I know that is, but the development districts like this or this types of an arrangement.
Yeah, I mean, it is a common practice, and it's let's keep it short. Yeah, it is. I mean, and I think that the auditor, hit on the nail on the head. There's these agreements can be complex, and having all the different eyes on it is a good idea as well.
All right, any other questions or comments on that?
Does everybody in that area end up, so we talked about the first two in the pool. Does the third person in the pool have to also chip in?
So that would be ideal, obviously. Oh, sorry, Andrew. On some of the, obviously they wouldn't really have you wouldn't have as much leverage over them to get them to step up, but there are other things like the pedestrian bridge or different things that would provide the benefit that we would be able to look at long-term to get them to go in. So we have included some of the other property owners in the conversation. So they're like, listen, we don't have any plans right now. We don't really need that infrastructure, so why would we chip in? All right.
But in the same theory of a rotary policy where you build it for the future person to chip in, I mean, it seems like there's a incentive not to develop first, because then you don't have to contribute into
And
you're not contributing to 80 or 140K a year. it- It's like a negative inducement or whatever.
Yeah, potentially, it definitely is tricky anytime you're trying to get people to agree and come up with people on something. It is, really what you're talking about is the new authority, that's not something we've dealt with, and it gets very complex, but that in essence puts better requirements on any properties in the specified footprint that it's almost like an additional tax that they pay into. And that's not something that we have done or that I would be a proponent for just because of the complexities. So I think that this is a good initial tool, and I think it's gonna help achieve what we're starting to want to achieve in this area, while giving us that ability to kind of help control the development a little bit without additional tax involved.
The parcels that aren't ready to sell, that you're looking at us purchasing.
Mhm.
Why aren't they looking to sell? Is it farm ground? Is it?
So some of it has wetlands on it, so it would have to be green space, which really can be a good amenity for that area. Some of it then is really because it's relatively landlocked at this point, and there's not a specific plan to develop down to it.
And there wasn't an option to move to the west and not be impacted by the wetland area, because I was gonna ask you, is economic development looking at these parcels that aren't ready to sell, but if you can't develop on them? So they couldn't have moved the street and everything to the west to eliminate having to purchase that at all?
I have not been at the table with the individual private property owners and why, but I believe both of the properties that Casto is buying, as well as that the hotel is buying, those are all owned by the same group, and so I think that probably property owner wanted both the Casto development and Casto's buying, then that other portion of the parcels all together.
And there's not room for them to put a street in?
So we do have the ability to take down a roadway through it, but they wouldn't be able to develop any additional properties really on it. So here, you can, so this, because there's the utility, I keep using the wrong thing. So we do have kind of preliminary specs to be able to bring a roadway down here. And we would be able to bring it through here and connect down here if that was ever future development. But there is some wetlands and different things kind of in this area as well as wooded area. And then with the idea of bringing the bridge over, they're like, we don't really need this. They plan to develop here some. But they didn't need this acreage and they would rather sell it to the city and be able to have the cash up.
you say the triangle was where wetlands is, the lower.
A portion of it. I don't know the specific locations, but we are able to put paths, you'd be able to put parks amenities, you'd be able to put the pedestrian bridge, you'd be able to put a roadway, but it's not sufficient enough because of how it's broken up from the wetland to be able to really develop. All right, so community reinvestment area. Supports two primary objectives. 2.5, continue to protect the 1% income tax and ensure long-term sustainability or stability and sustainability. 4, a thriving business environment that takes care of existing businesses, attracts new businesses, supports local entrepreneurs, and is economically sustainable. All right, so as we've been working over the last couple of years with Andrew to review all of our documents, see what types of incentives we're doing, get his feedback on the different programs we have available. He said, hey, you know what, your CRA is really cool, but I think that you have a problem. I think the state changed the rules and you should give that a look. So we did engage outside counsel. They gave it a look, and our CRA currently is worded to be a citywide CRA, which is fine, except for that when you do a boundary expansion, that it counts as an amendment. And with your amendments as a CRA, you can only do 2 amendments before you have to go to a post 94 CRA. And a post 94 CRA, well, here, a pre 94 CRA is 100% abatement. It has to be 100% abatement for the project. And then you tier the number of years that that improved value is abated based off of the value of investment that is made. With a post 94, each individual project is brought to council for consideration and determination on what level of abatement and for how long you want to give it. So it's more project specific. Additionally, anything that you abate on the improved value over 75% have to get school board approval as well. So with our CRA, they said our amendments were still in line. We don't have to roll to a post 94. However, I do think that we're now in a position as a community where it doesn't hurt for us to move away from kind of a property incentive to a more income tax, revenue focused kind of job specific incentive. So what I am recommending is that one, our outside counsel says, hey, just to make sure you are very clearly in compliance, even though yours was approved before this, update your existing CRA to the new City of Findlay boundaries, so that it makes sure that you're in conformity and shows that. And then what I would like to do is actually determine a process for sunsetting our existing CRA structure and moving to a post 94 CRA. So what I would like to do, and I can just have the outline there below, and we have talked with outside counsel about this. Mr. Wagner has been involved and they have signed off on the proposed structure of doing this, is to say, update it to existing boundaries, and then we would move towards saying any project that is currently underway, includes language that any projects wishing to receive the current abatement structure must complete their construction by whatever date we determine, and have a certificate of occupancy received, which is our standard process. They then complete it, we give them a certificate of occupancy, they submit their paperwork then to say what qualifies for the abatement. Or we could also then have the option, so I would say definitely that, and then we could also add this provision that if somebody has begun vertical construction and have notified us and we have said, yes, we recognize that you have begun construction, then they can, and we could even set a timeline on it or whatnot. We sign off on it, then they could still qualify for this prior version. Then we would look to update a new CRA, and what you have to do for the new CRAs is you pass a resolution saying, here's our community reinvestment area. Yes, we are open to them. And then people know when they're doing a project, they can come to you for consideration. And before they begin construction, they need sign off on what the expectations of the agreement are. So there are communities across the state that have both structures. Ours has served us really well over the years, but I think it's a good opportunity with this change to look at updating to the post 94 CRA. And again, as I mentioned, it gives us individual flexibility, so council's more involved in the discussion. And then any abatement over the 75% increased value would have to receive school board support. So what I'm looking from you all today is really just general direction and support. And if you guys are cool with this structure, what we would do is then I would work with Mr. Wagner as well as outside counsel to prepare legislation. And then we could work with and like the ordinance that would be necessary, paperwork that would be necessary. And then we could set up another meeting to start talking about what the boundaries for the post 94 CRA would look like.
Have you found any other cities in Ohio that actually have a whole city CRA?
Yeah, there have been some, I don't know the specific ones, I would have to ask Price Finley, I know that they did, but there's been others.
There are other cities that have a whole city CRA. And then,
So many of the new ones, and Andrew, feel free to determine if you know specific ones, but there are quite a few, especially under the post 94 CRA structure, because you say, hey, we'll do it anywhere in the city, but then you still have individual control of what the agreement is, and you can still say no. It's just saying we're willing to in this area.
So I thought we had both. I thought we had a 394. And then we added a second one, and when we expanded it citywide, we expanded, I thought, the second one.
So we do technically still have another one,
We're both pre-9.
but yeah, they're both pre-94 and the other
We
one's
just
just.
expanded one.
Correct.
they're limited on your expansions. So
Yeah,
this is part
two
of the
expansions
problem.
per-
This one would still be fine with the expansion.
This will be the final expansion.
Correct. But I'm saying, let's do the final expansion, make sure we have all the i's dotted, t's crossed, we're all kosher, and then sunset it.
So what area are you looking at expanding?
The entire city of Findlay corporation limits at this point in time.
So Sheets, that's currently, Sheets is in, or no, Sheets is not.
Sheets is annexed into the city of Findlay, so
They're not updated. We do not have an updated map. And so we need to do a new city boundary map. right?
Correct. Yep, so our legal counsel said, listen, you guys have this in place before the state updated their language to further clarify this. He's like, you're probably okay because you did that. There hasn't been any legal challenges against it. However, to confirm that you guys have all your i's dotted and t's crossed, you should update so that it's shown that all of those were covered. That was the intent of council, was to provide it to anybody in the corporation limits. You meet at that point of time, and then you can go and really we could leave it at that and do nothing and it would be compliant. And it'd all be good. But what I'm saying is, I think it served its purpose. We've been able to develop and get new manufacturing coming into our community. But I would like to now switch to a more income job specific revenue structure rather than a investment focus.
But the key to this discussion is we're cleaning up a potential legal matter. Is why we're having this conversation, because a CRA is for blighted areas. And we won't be able to create a whole new CRA in our industrial areas because they're not blighted. So our last and final expansion will be it.
So I already said that yes, this expansion would be the last expansion legally allowed under this. However, as you are also aware, because you were involved in some of the conversations, our outside counsel has stated there's no proof that this would be a legal issue because this has not been a challenged item and the law was changed after we had our structure set in a compliant fashion.
And I was, to be clear, I was in a meeting and then you eliminated me. Those meetings
didn't
have documentation from.
Okay, stop.
So just don't
Stop.
include me in it.
Stop.
Don't include me in it when I don't know what legal counsel said, but you won't share it.
In 2013, when we created this, because I was actually on council, and I just took it on council, it was the intent to create this to be citywide and to expand the city with expanding boundaries. I mean, we worked hard to make sure that was how this operated. So if the state changed the rules after the fact, and the state counteracted.
Yeah.
There's no doubt that was what we were, you know.
So really what I need from this committee, is, yeah,
We talked more about this to away from a property oriented incentive to income tax.
Yeah.
Oriented, or is that a standalone issue from the modification of the CRA?
yeah, so I would say they're two separate issues. I would say regardless, the outside counsel has advised that we update it to the boundary marks to come into compliance with the changes in the state code. So we need to do that regardless. Then when we look at how do we want to address CRAs moving forward, that is up for discussion. If you guys want to update it and leave it, that's fine. That's not my recommendation. But I would say that they're kind of, we need to do one regardless of what we do with statute.
I can add to that, I think, and I was in the initial discussions with the attorney as we were identifying my big concern. What's our real potential liability based on where the state was and everything else? And the feeling was that a potential liability was minimal because we were so deep into the time period for those CRAs that were already in place. The real issue is promises made for businesses like Sheets and whatnot that remain out there. So if this is done, we basically are formally using our second amendment, and you can call it sunsetting, but basically we wouldn't be allowed to amend it again anyways. So that puts us in a position where we still have one remaining pre-94, and anything new we add that's a post-94. It's more a question of what's most appropriate for where we want to go. So it's from a fiscal point of view, this one piece here, regardless of anything else, is probably an important step.
To be clear though, the sunsetting is what I am saying is we will get rid of. So we need to,
When they're eliminated.
well, that other one, are you talking about CRA two, that other little one? That one I was gonna leave because it's like a 5 block.
Well, no, you're amending it. So
But-
it's still pre-94.
Yeah, but I'm saying I wanna get rid of,
More beyond that.
No,
That's what it is.
I wanna get, yes, but then I wanna get rid of it.
How do you do that?
You abolish it. We just say we're going to revoke after this point in time. So that's why we would,
So it'll sit for 10 years and go away.
no, so I think
Promise.
based off of based off of the conversation with the attorney and that we will work through with him, is he said, though, we can say no further CRAs will be granted under the pre-94 for the time that we just determine after we have granted these. So that's why I'm saying, we say, hey, if your project is complete by this date, then you'll get the pre-94.
Get the 100.
And if you have submitted and we know and we have signed off, okay, you'll get the 100%, then you'll get the pre-find 94. After that, then we would say no more pre-94s are issued. Now, how the attorney says if it is at this time and point in time, it is they're authorized and they're out there and we need to remove it off the books. I don't know the legality of how he would recommend we do that. But I just want to be clear that I'm saying the pre-94 would no longer be in use within the city of Findlay. Yeah,
Jim, I've seen a little bit on it. I mean, it's extremely complicated, but what they're gonna do for us is get us where we need to be going forward. What we've done in the past is okay. There's some clarification language that makes it okay. And then going forward in the direction that we want, they can do that. And then I guess, for lack of better words, we'd be good to go. I mean, this stuff is from old. And so it's running its course.
So is the sunset built into the segment or sunset something that happens after the second one?
so he did not, I don't remember him specifically saying how it would be done, but he said, yeah, you can do that. That's not a problem.
My understanding is we're gonna get recommendations from them that we would be able to bring in front of this group or whoever else to then answer those kind of questions. And then when he puts it into, takes that out of legalese and puts it into everybody else's understanding of the language and say, this is what it's gonna do and how it's gonna do it. Forget what it says, forget the legal language. This is what it's gonna do. And then we can digest that and make sure that's what's right for Finland.
Yeah, and I had shared this kind of proposal with him. He said, yes, we can do that. I have not asked him to put it in that legal format of how we would go about it.
So you were in the middle of saying what you wanted from,
I just wanted kind of support for moving in this direction before we went and paid for an attorney. This is legal.
I'm gonna say it's no brainer, but it's pretty close. I mean, if this continues to get the intent of the 2013 council and practice in the city from that point forward. And our legal counsel says we should want to, the auditor says we should. So I definitely support it.
What's the other option? The income tax proposal changes, you said. You want to go, so I guess looking for a little more detail on.
We're getting into that as the next item.
I guess before you can, make a decision on this first part, you have to say you want to go the other way, right?
No,
So you can just not do either one.
yeah, that would be pretty dumb, but but technically, yeah, they're separate items.
I think about position.
Yeah, yes, this is a standalone, because we need to move forward. Actually, like, item one that I need support on is proceeding with updating the boundary map for the existing citywide CRA. So that's item one.
Can I add one more comment there, if you don't mind? And that's to Andrew's credit, and I thank you, Andrew, for pointing out this need looked at. A big part of this, one standalone item is it goes to promises made. Companies like Sheets that were there, we were told this is the way our CRA works. Then we found out, well, we think it doesn't. So this honors a promise, I guess, from that aspect. If you want to look at it that way.
Which goes to my statement that this
Yeah.
is the way we've operated. Yes, right, John, we should. We made an agreement with Sheets and. And we honored.
And then the second item, I don't know how you want to break it out, then is the second of moving forward with including the language about sunset.
Real quick, there was 1 out of 5, well, I kind of guess where you are on this, Mayor, but there's 3 other on the strategic planning committee. That has so far been not stated an opinion on that first item.
I'm good to that.
oh yeah, I think it's as close to a no-brainer as you get.
I'm just scared.
The better for
Yeah, you remember.
So I'll remind myself, no, I'm gonna go too. I think it makes sense. I think we'll cover it. I like the fact that we cover our bases and getting rid of the old, not the old pre-94. Updating all that, bring it up to speed, and then we don't have to have this conversation over and over again about what we're at, or what the potential liability out there.
Okay, so then the next item that I need direction on is, are we interested in sunset the pre-94 and moving to a post-94?
And that's where I have to see what the post 94, I mean, if it's just the exact same thing. As I recall, 13, there was a reason we didn't want to make that migration, but
Yeah, so the big challenge with the pre versus post is that, you know, businesses prefer to not deal with political bodies. And so when you have a pre-94, it's a set structure and people know what to expect. And they say, we check the boxes, all right, we're good. With the post-94, they have to work with council and determine the variables, and businesses don't always like having the variables or having things, you know, have to be a public process and all of that. So I think that that is the biggest challenge. But I think it goes to the essence of what we've talked about the last couple of years, is that, you know, it was helpful to bring in manufacturing and diversify our economy. We're now in a position where we can be more picky about businesses and what level of investments we want. And so this allows us to be able to still check the economic development box of, yes, we offer a property tax abatement, but then we can evaluate each project on a case by case basis.
As an ex officio, I'd be interested in a lot more information on it before we move forward with the legal language, just so we have a better understanding. Just a short view. So
On the sunset, Jim.
yeah, on the sunset of that 94, whatever it looked like.
Yeah.
Guess the only problem is,
You've
I
got
think
it.
you're beyond my area of expertise on the sunsetting process. We really need an attorney. to
I think
go
he's
on.
gonna get us that recommendation. That's gonna be part of his recommendation, is an explanation of what we're going from
Yeah.
pre-post.
Let's zoom them in like we did before and just explain it to this group.
Yeah, so you just want an explanation of what the
What is
proposal
represented,
is and,
why, and what it looked like.
okay.
And we're all fully informed.
Yeah, I would make that the second bullet here instead of
Schedule.
moving forward with it. Let's schedule a meeting to get into the specifics, see what it looks like before we start spending the big money, right? With
Luckily, hopefully it's not too expensive, because you should be able to just dust off the language from every other community that's established a post 94 CRA.
You know he won't do that. Or he might, but he's not gonna charge you that
The
way.
English language has changed, I think, to start from scratch.
Wait, you don't want it in Latin? Okay, very good. And then that kind of covers the next section, right? So I will work to schedule him to zoom in to discuss that.
I would make a motion, just so I can keep up with my paperwork here. That we recommend that the mayor move forward with changes to the pre-1994 CRA, updating the specific boundaries. Also get an update and details on potential sunset
And establishment.
and establishment of a new establishment or sunset of the current CRA and establishment of a post 94 CRA.
Perfectly not at 3 o'clock on Friday.
These people with their jobs.
Was that a second? That was a second. Discussion. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Thank you, Mary. Go ahead.
Very good. All right, so moving into the income tax rebate structure. So this is really the exact same thing that I introduced in January of 2024 at the committee of the whole meeting. And then we kind of just decided to pump the brakes, get through some other things, and then bring this up for discussion. I appreciate a couple of the committee members said, hey, what's the status? And I said, you know what, we need to dust it off and bring it back up, because I think it's still a good plan. So I'm gonna just go through this as a reminder. Building a strong community, in my opinion, comes with people, then good policies, good programs, and you build a thriving community. So as we look at a income tax rebate, so one of the things that is helpful when we are competing for potential investments is when site selectors or companies reach out to economic development or to the city. They say, hey, kind of, do you meet this criteria? What does your water and sewer look like? What do all these other things look like? Do you check these boxes? And right now, we don't have the ability to say that we offer an income tax incentive of any kind. So with kind of talking and looking at how do we, one, be more competitive, but again, continue to try to attract some of the more white collar businesses that we've been interested in, that we've been competing for, but haven't just been able to land them. I think that this is a good opportunity. So I've gone through and identified the target industries that economic development and I have been working on, but put them in writing. So here are the main ones. So corporate headquarters are managing offices, and because it's kind of weird if you're not familiar with NAICS codes, but the NAICS codes are industry-specific codes that the federal government uses to categorize and track data for industry. So the numbers at the end are specific codes that we would be able to tie them to. And Mary has been doing a great job. I've been working with her. She's been updating all of our businesses to have those codes on them as well. So corporate headquarters are managing office, healthcare, energy, aerospace, advanced manufacturing, finance, information technology, and other on a case-by-case basis. So the goal would be that we put into in process, and I actually pulled from a couple of other communities. Dublin, Ohio actually has a structure that I've used. Their application kind of tweaked it very thinly to be able to say, hey, this is what we're interested in. And we would have an application process for businesses that are looking to locate here or to do an expansion here. If they fall into one of these industries, then they would be able to qualify for this. And then obviously on the case by case basis as well. If there was an industry that didn't fall in this and something really unique and they came to us and we wanted to do it, then we could also offer it, but they would have a slightly different process. All right, so these are, again, just kind of my thoughts and proposals on a new attraction project on the withholding income tax. So they would still have to pay their business tax, but it would be on the withholding side and it would go to the business. Now, when I've been running all of my modeling and looking at it, I know these are not big dollars, right? With a 1% income tax, 20% of a 1% is not a huge number, but it's something. So what I recommended when I built this out is if you are paying your employee $60 to $69,999, and you are adding 3 employees, you would get it at 20% for 1 year. So a one-time thing. On the other end of the spectrum, if you're paying an employee over $150,000 and you're bringing 250 of them, then you would get 80% abatement for 7 years. So that's kind of how it's tiered out. It's trying to incentivize higher paying and more. On the other side, we have expansion. So also want to be able to support local businesses that may want to bring in and add additional jobs. And again, all of the specifics are for discussion. This was just my thoughts on it. But I was like, hey, if a local dentist office wants to recruit another dentist and pay them whatever dentist makes, I don't know, but I'm assuming it's over 150,000. Then hey, they would qualify for it for a couple of years. So I wanted to make sure that we were accounting for that as well. So this is for expansions, again, 50% for 250 employees at over 150, you get it for 7 years. You're paying 61,000 and you're adding 2 people at 10, you would get 10% for 1 year. And then I did have a structure in there. The expansion, you obviously have to show that you've maintained a level of employees for a period of time that is based off of that projections of growth. It's not just like, oh, hey, next year we were gonna add these 5 people, but now we can get a rebate for it, right? So it's kind of saying like you have to, so those numbers of jobs, we may want to adjust for some of the different levels. But I wanted to just start discussion on this because I do think it can be helpful, especially with the attraction of new businesses. I did also think through, again, it doesn't include benefits or bonuses. This is the actual salary. If an existing business is making a significant expansion, right? It's a big investment, then I think that it would make sense to look at it as an attraction. So some of our existing businesses come to us and say, hey, we're competing with our, I'll say Japan, we're competing with an expansion in Japan, but we could have it come to Finley, and we're gonna be doing a $50 million expansion. If you guys can, would you be willing to do that? Then I think it should go on the attraction scale rather than the expansion scale. Existing businesses do not qualify for a rebate simply when changing an employee name. So if they're changing their EIN, or just kind of doing some of the legal rigmarole, sometimes businesses do that within and target businesses. Those businesses that were operating for less than 5 years qualify under an attraction rebate. So trying to incentivize some small businesses that may be getting started, that we could support them. So again, just kind of an overview of the process. If businesses is in a targeted sector throughout the year, they would notify the city of their anticipated growth. And again, I have like a worksheet that Dublin does that I think is really well laid out. They would execute their rebate agreement, and then in April, when they're doing their tax filing, they would have to complete a report showing the change. So they couldn't get the rebate for 10 people that they hired and then turn around and fire people. And then if the business again is not in a targeted industry or sector, they could reach out to the city and individual review and approval process to determine if it's one that we want to. Questions on that? Go back to the attraction.
You mentioned dentist. If they brought another dentist into the practice, they could qualify. So would that be for the hospital every time they expand with more doctors, they would be able to use it?
Potentially. But they would be under the expansion. And so again, that's why I said we could look at adjusting the percentages or years, so we could say, listen, if it's an existing business, you would have to add at least 15 people before you would qualify. That, if you're paying, but I don't know, if business hours are expanding and we want to pay somebody over $150,000, then I'm pretty supportive of that, but we can look at the nitty gritty.
What's Dublin's income tax rate? Used to know.
I think it's at least 2.
1% income tax is a pretty good incentive. Andrew, have you vetted this proposal?
In what way? I mean, we've seen these types of plans put out there with other communities.
Have you ever seen it be successful with a community with a 1%? Because I would think the 1% is a significant incentive on its own. Because our income tax is
No,
only.
I'd have to think about that. I one that comes to the top of my head right now is maybe Marysville, and I forget if they're at 1 and 1.5. So I'm not sure if there's we'd have to do a little research on that and dig into that.
That'd be worth knowing.
So Jim, your thought was it's not worthwhile because we're so low in the first place.
Well, I have several thoughts, but my first question is, I mean, that's your bread and butter, that's your rip.
Understood.
And it's so little, if it is so little, is it gonna make a difference? But on the flip side is, how's it gonna hurt you?
I think we talked about this back when the first time we went through it, and it kind of came down to, the numbers weren't necessarily huge for the potential for the people coming in and expansion. But it was just another tool belt of economic development to say, yes, they've thought about this. You're already getting a good deal on 1% versus the Dublins in the world, which is great, but still, they're still incentivizing that.
Well,
Can we look at that?
well, and that was the question I have, Andrew. Do you see situations, Andrew, where you do something like this in a way, it becomes rather than codified as a global incentive? Your economic development people know it's a potential. In other words, council says, should there be specific incentives that would help, we can bring each to this group case by case, much like we did years ago with Cooper Tire. They were evaluating which plant they were going to close in the United States, so we incentivized them by giving them $300,000 worth of free water. It was a one-off that we did rather than a global commitment. And can you, maybe not today because as late as it is, but can you in the near future provide us some thoughts from your perspective
as to be able to do one-offs versus a global thing like this that could create unintended consequences?
Yeah, I think we could do that. I think also reaching out to OEDA and maybe they could be a resource. I'm not sure if the city's a part of that organization, to see if they've got some information on, what cities are at the 1% level and where it's been successful and how they've done it. I think would be a smart move as well.
And just. Don't worry about it, it's just not taking notes from me anymore. The one thing I want to be clear about too is this is a concept that I'm presenting for feedback. This is not the end all be all. So if council wants to say, we're willing to put this out there, we want it to have a deal to be specific, that's fine. I think it is the real big benefit of saying, that we check the box or we have it and that we have a clear structure so that it is consistent. So that we are not playing favorites with people. So I, again, just wanted to bring this up, that this is something I really would like to kind of move forward with in some structure. And so I will work with Andrew and collect and reach out to Ohio EPA. That's a great example. And I'll also touch base. I know I wanted to go down to Dublin with Cordonia, I had to leave, but with Rob and Cordonia to kind of meet with their team and say, so there he is. We want to do our road trip to Dublin, to talk to their team, because they're doing a lot of really good things. So, but just general, again, I didn't want to put legwork into something that you guys said, no, this is really stupid, to stop bringing it up.
One thing that goes through my mind as I hear this, and I was looking up on. Like, what's the NICS code for CPA fund? It's a 54, it's under information technology. So if a CPA firm wanted to work on a specific expansion and bring in more CPAs, which here's a way we can do incentivizing on small business. It's not that you have to do a huge capital expansion in order to get incentive. So that part of it, I particularly like, and the fact that they could get it for a 1-1 too, because it's just a small business that's the driver a lot of times. What I can't put my head around is how you track this. I mean, is it almost too named deploy, or how, what is how the company then proves that they're living up to their end of the bargain, that they brought the position has to be there and has to stay, and how you actually track that and the mechanism to track that.
Yeah, so all great points, because that's exactly where my mind was at when I put this together, is that, okay, white collar office type positions do not have significant capital investment typically associated with, building out a structure. And so what incentive would support that? And I determined these codes. I took all of our businesses that I had the NAICS codes for and categorized them and started looking through and said, okay, what are the industries, one, we're trying to attract, and two, that we would want to see expansion in within our community. So those were intentional. And I talked it through with Mary, and Mary in income tax said that forms would work and that they have the ability to kind of report that to folks. So she did not feel that it was overly cumbersome to be able to hold folks accountable.
To your point, Grant, one of our more recent, within the last 2-year developments, we were promised 150 good jobs. And I can tell you for sure, we didn't get 13. So the accountability is a huge part of that. So how do you do it? Are you going to end up in a situation where you're going to have to go out and collect others? So the logistics of that we'll have to be involved in, because it has to be auditable and trackable and auditable to find out in my office with the state.
Is the mechanism of it, let's say it's a 50%. Is a rebate after the fact? So that you look at the payroll and then you've collected it throughout the year, and then.
Correct.
Yearly.
And then.
Yeah.
The other one would be. I'll pick on Josh just as an easy example. Josh is.
Easy to
Josh is an employee of Whirlpool. Whirlpool decides to go out and, outsource their, what Josh does to a third-party provider, which then hires Josh. So you have the new company Acme,
Good point.
Employment Services that now sets up in Finley. Whirlpool drops Josh, Acme hires Josh, and then asks for that incentive. They've created a job for Acme. But they lost the job. It's, you start incentivizing that type of, behavior. That was a better word than nonsense, which I was thinking. And, because I don't think that's our intent.
Yeah,
We
definitely
want people to add one. Be it from Acme or their own person, their own.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. We definitely don't want to see that happen. So I think that there's a couple of ways to address that is one. And I would have to, again, kind of talk through with Mary the tracking, but I think. We'd have to have a mechanism for companies to say, and there has to be kind of a maintain head count for a period of time aspect of it. And then two, I guess, in that situation, what is the NAICS code of that type of business? Are they a professional service or are they a contractor? Like, so I would have to dig into that a little
It'd
bit
be
more.
interesting to hear how
Yeah.
double. Same thing based on their community.
What would concern me also is that this type of incentive would actually be needed to put in type of 21. Would think we would have enough tools in our toolbox and enough prime ground, and enough positives in the community via our strategic plan. This is almost a ridiculously small amount of money. But it's so complicated. Your cost of tracking and doing this is gonna be significant, but they just
Do you think it's attractional or is it gonna be expansion of existing? I would think you have.
I think you're set up. No,
The CPA.
everybody's gonna want it, they can get it. So, and is it as fun?
But they have to expand to do it. They have to add. That's a.
Head count this year, lay them off, add them again 2 years from now. You know, it's gonna have to close the economy.
Well, that was my
Yeah.
question. If you were giving a 7-year for 250 employees, do you not give back a 7 until after 7 years or in year
Yeah.
3 and year 7? Because like Sheets is gonna bring 750 over 4 years, 5 years. So they keep getting a new expansion? Or they just go the original one is?
And is that really where we wanna go?
And what does it cost us to hire another person in income tax to manage it?
I think that those are great questions, and that would be in the details of the contract or the agreement, how it's worded, right? And how we guard against it. But Jim, go back to your point though. Is it the way we want to go? I mean, we're incentivizing. It's one of the few things that we as a governmental entity.
You've done it by having 1%. And as we've said, every company, you
Yes,
go
but
anywhere you
this
want
is
and they'll have
but
2
we've
or
already
3.
done that, Jim, and this is where we're at. We're here today. We've always had 1%. We're at here today.
Exactly.
Okay.
We're in the right spot. So my point is,
Place according to you.
no, not being argumentative. What I'm saying is, think about it a minute. Their options in these other communities are 1.5%, 2.5%, 3.5%, 4.5% income tax. Our option is a 1%. We have the best. We have the easy stuff. If we sell it right, we market it right, and we're promoting to the right type of companies. Checking a box is the wrong reason. The right reason is that we're getting what we want and we're attracting them correctly. It's always easy to sell the best, and we have the best income tax in the state.
I don't disagree with anything you just said. However, you're the first person to want to say that where we're at today is not the right place to be in the direction that we're going. Correct?
And I know
So,
why.
and-
Yeah. I mean,
Well,
and it's
okay.
not our 1%.
Well, that's what we've had forever. Why, your statement is 1% is the selling point.
Well, it is.
Why has
It
it
is.
not brought to us all this great business so far?
And think about that a minute, because Crown goes for higher prices to distribution centers than it does to manufacturing. Promoting and selling and bringing in high tier manufacturing is very difficult, and we're not doing it. We're selling to transportation, labor, distribution and warehousing.
Yeah.
That's our, and
We're
that's
not
our
selling
target,
anything.
that's our target market. And at one
Okay.
point we switched to
So regard-
retail.
To our question here, is this worth more investigation, more?
That's different.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's a good question.
I think so. I think this is an interesting concept. And I'll reiterate what interests me most is that it can, offer some, yeah, it can target small business. It can provide a benefit to smaller businesses that are full with.
What do you anticipate that number to be? If you had a budget in your, in projections, if they implemented this, are we talking 500,000 a year? Are we talking 100,000 a year out of?
I have no clue, but the businesses have to submit in advance, so we will be able to appropriately budget that
But we
based on
can't-
the information they provide.
But if they met the criteria, we couldn't deny it, similar to how the CRA is currently. If they meet the qualifications, you get the CRA, meet the qualifications, you get the income tax. And I think, Jeff, your question with Jim. We're our 1% is a huge selling point for economic development in our community. But the mayor even said we get site selection leads, we get leads. We aren't marketing to what we want.
That's not true, Holly.
It-
You
it-
do not know because you are not a part of this conversation. So
Okay,
that's a whole
so
other
It's
conversation.
not been proven.
But I've been in
Otherwise,
multiple
talking-
conversations with businesses on a regular
Okay.
basis that are interested in coming here, that are high paying, white collar jobs.
It's great.
And they come to the community and they say, well, right, this is a great community, we really like it, but there's not.
So let me
available around
rephrase it for you that we
I'll
have.
make a motion. I'll make a motion.
Hold on,
Yeah.
hold on. colleagues.
Well, let me finish. I mean, she got to
Make a
put me,
motion.
and. I mean, your statement and what we're attracting in the last strategic plan meeting was branding our community to attract economic development. The mayor may be having conversations, great. Our community is not seeing that. And if we were attracting what we wanted, great. We have these tools, but right now, site selection and leads from the state
Okay,
aren't.
totally different conversation.
Well, no, because
I
we
make a
look at
mo-
our
I make a
focus
motion that-
infrastructure and what our community is going towards.
I
So-
make a motion that we ask the mayor to continue to flesh out, this idea.
Second.
Then a motion and a second. Discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion passes. Mayor, anything else on your agenda?
I do not believe so.
Andrew, thank you for taking time away for your joining us this afternoon.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Hang out with us is vacation. We know.
All righty, take care.
Take your time. Have a good weekend.
Adjournment. Thank you.
Appreciate it, everybody. Oh, let's see if I don't know how to shut everything off here.
Yeah.